Hello and welcome to the Upload Virtual Studio. I'm Ian Hamilton. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you enjoyed the gaming show we just had a little while ago. We'll be back on Monday, I think, for the tech show, the trend show. But I had an incredible demo yesterday, and I wanted to get the Spatial CEO here into our studio to talk about some of these features because I've had demos before with Spatial, and it's always been pretty impressive. But kind of they threw a dozen features at me in a very short amount of time, and I wanted to come to our studio, have an interview about it, talk about it with our audience, and really break down what's going on with remote work and what these latest features are all about and why they matter. So tell us who you are and how Spatial got started.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Anand Agarawala, CEO and co-founder of Spatial, coming to you live from New York. Spatial started about 4.5 years ago, right around when the HoloLens 1 was announced. I think we were in DK1, DK2 of Oculus kind of thing. And the idea was that, I'd been working in 3D interfaces for a while with BumpTop, my first startup, which we sold to Google back in 2010. But that was taking a gaming grade physics engine for your computer desktop and making it really interactive. My co-founder Jinha, he's been working in AR for a while. We basically tried the HoloLens and was like, oh crap, this is I'd seen the progress of VR, but because of how immersive it is and how it can potentially disconnect you from the real world, it was always a little wondering about the impact. But I tried the HoloLens and was just like, holy crap, I can see the line to the future. Because tech is, the field of view is small, but tech is really good at expanding that and making that bigger and so on. And so if we know that it's inevitable that these AR VR headsets are going to be our next computer in some number of years, I want to be part of that trend and want to kind of create a company to build some of those defining generational interfaces for that new paradigm.
And thank you for joining us, Ryan. Hello, VR Dynamite. Everyone else, leave any comments. I can read them out. If you have an interesting question about remote work, about Spatial, I can bring it up and we can talk about it. Is this the latest one? No, this is one of your earlier trailers showing some of the AR things, right? So
Yeah.
we last met you last year at CES, which I love that this was brought up in my demo yesterday, where that was more or less the last tech conference. After that tech conference, basically the entire tech conference slate got canceled, and that was basically the end of it. And everything is more or less going virtual now. And we did this demo last year. It was mostly on AR headsets at the time. And can you explain what happened sort of coming out of CS from your perspective and how your product may have changed since then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2020 was a crazy year for us. I mean, it was crazier for everybody, I think, with COVID. But right after COVID, right after CS, COVID kind of happened and the world shut down. And Spatial going into 2020 was an enterprise AR first and kind of enterprise focused company because the devices of the day was the HoloLens. The Quest 1 existed, but Spatial actually didn't even have a Quest version. What happened was when COVID hit, all these people were at home, and previously we kind of believed that, hey, AR is more important because when you're in a conference room with other people, you want to be able to see them and not cut off them from the rest of the world. Well, COVID happened. You're probably in a refashioned broom closet that you've turned into your office, and you kind of want to immerse yourself into this world and be with your colleagues. So VR and the Quest became incredibly important. Later last year, the Quest 2 launched, which has just been a kind of an inflection point. It's actually sold the same number of days for the iPhone 1 to reach 1 million units, same number as Quest 2. And they're well on their way to becoming a 10 million unit device. So we really transformed last year. I mean, we had this huge surge in interest. We actually had over 130x growth last year on Spatial. And this was like, our enterprise use cases just kind of got completely expanded. I mean, it went to church groups trying to meet up, or like our typical bread and butter use cases of looking at 3D data together. Whether that's a automotive car or like a geospatial or what have you, or you're an architect looking at buildings. But that really expanded to kind of broader use cases. On top of that, Quest 2 drove us to kind of new usage heights, and we've logged over 8 million minutes in spatial since then. So we've just seen stuff expand. Yeah, you can see here, I mean, immersive presentations. Like, I think we all hit kind of a Zoom fatigue point last year. And, Zoom is like a single threaded conversation. And you can't really, like, you can't high five somebody or have that same kind of congeniality, or whiteboard together, or that's one thing we heard over and over from our users. Again, like, I just wish I could jump into a room and whiteboard with people. So it was just an explosive year for us, and I think the industry, as we saw VR really just take off.
Mm. Let's put up the latest video that was captured yesterday of my demo, and I want to run through, talk about some of these things that I saw all together here. Now, the key thing to keep in mind, and I want to get into this with you a little bit, is we've seen a lot of these features, pieces of them in tech demos, in other apps already on the Quest store in some cases.
Hmm.
But the fact that we did all of these things one after the other, and all simultaneously constantly blows my mind a lot. So you uploaded a 3D model that was captured on iPhones or iPads. So the latest versions of iPhone hardware have LiDAR sensors in them. They can also capture off of the front sensor in some cases for object capture. But the back camera can do sort of environment capture, and there's a number of competing apps right now to try to do really great 3D capture. But you pulled in multiple 3D models of real world spaces, resized them right in front of me, uh, converted them into our environment. So I was sitting in a scan of your place, I think, right?
Yeah, on my house. Yeah, I scanned it with our LiDAR app. Yeah.
And then this wasn't a scan. This was a very, very high quality 3D model environment that was just shockingly crisp to be inside. And my avatar over here, the one that kind of I don't know how you picked this particular movie, but I'm a DC fan at heart, and I've been waiting for good DC movies to come out, and I've been obsessed with the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and you pulled up in a browser window HBO Max, and then put on Zack Snyder's Justice League. And then I pointed to a spot in the play
Yeah.
where I wanted to watch in the thing. I said, "Hey, can you go to the beginning of Act 3 right here on the timeline?" And boom, another person in the Jacob, I think,
Hmm.
went over and put it to that spot in the movie. And we're all six of us watching together this movie that's streaming from a Mac browser to VR with six of us co-located, and all I really had to do to make this possible was load up the latest version of your spatial app. Um, it's
That's a
yeah, I mean
Yeah, that's
that's a
exactly
lot.
right. No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, that's the beauty of what we try to do with spatial, is take all the kind of latest awesome stuff that you can do with this emerging field of technology, whether it's LiDAR scanning or streaming your desktop, or just all the cool stuff happening in 3D models. Like, if you look at Sketchfab, you'll see a ton of amazing kind of models on there, and pull those all together into a super, super simple package. And one of our big goals for this year is 5 seconds to spatial. We want people to be able to get into these experiences dead easily. As VR kind of gets its next, million or 10 million users, we really need to kind of make this stuff super simple. And the use cases that we showed you, they're actually all driven by what our users have asked for. So, like, here, this outdoor environment, I mean, we've just seen, like, people use spatial throughout COVID for, like, virtual offsites, hanging out, just, chilling. And so they asked for this sort of environment where we could do that, and it launched this outdoor environment. The casting, there's you watching. Yeah, this is actually
Yeah,
you, the
here's me
moment where you
me getting
pointed.
blown away by the fact that we're watching the exact movie I'd want to watch
Yeah.
in in a social space with people.
And the previous environment you saw was actually during COVID. We saw people doing, like, schools and, like, NYU and Columbia, using spatial to meet in, and so we created this auditorium environment where you could have that sort of meeting. And then we saw people stretching spatial for whatever use. I mean, like, people were literally hacking. One of the designers, actually, Michael Potts, who's head of M2 Studio, who designed this, he actually had to buy a bigger. He rented a bigger warehouse space so that he could actually walk to the end of the spatial model and click pin it into space, because it was so big. So these features we just organically started seeing users do. And we try to really tap into that and support it properly, right? Because I think that's when you get the beautiful marriage of, hey, what do users want? What are they already doing? And then what do we, yeah,
And we
you know,
hadn't
and
talked about
what
this
can we
one,
do to
but live
support it?
translation is another huge one where I was sort of blown
This is
away by
so
that
cool.
happening pretty quickly.
This is incredible. So this is also like, now that we've kind of created this kind of collaboration platform, we can layer in things like live translation. And just to give you a sense of what that is, basically in Spatial, I can say, "Hey, I'm speaking English, and can you translate?" And then, or here's the language I speak. I speak English. You speak German. Spatial will on the fly translate what you're saying, so that you can have a conversation. So we have folks who've had conversations from, some people are speaking German, some people are speaking Korean, and they've been able to communicate with no problem. And it's kind of like a holy crap moment, because hey, we're beyond just a meeting solution to something that like just changes the game for who can collaborate. Like, you know, this lights up all kinds of possibility for people from all parts of the world to actually work together now, which weren't able to before, thanks to all this technology.
Yeah, there's so many things being layered in here. A couple of people, let's see, Ryan's comment asking, do people still experience Zoom fatigue in VR with spatial if they're having long meetings? What's your impression of that? Because there is some studies out now where they're actually trying to like quantify what Zoom fatigue is. What is your impression of that with your software?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think like, what in some ways you actually kind of feel like a loneliness way. I've heard of that thing, is like once you take off the headset, or if you're an AR, like I've definitely had that experience where I'm at home and I'm in AR and I have all my friends or colleagues in my living room hanging out, and then you turn off the headset and you're like, oh, I'm just by myself, So there's a little bit of like, spatial loneliness piece. Now that said, there is a fundamental kind of comfort level of these headsets, right? So I think after the 2 hour mark, 3 hour mark, that's where these things start to like get a little bit. I mean, your battery might run out if you don't have a battery pack or plugged in, but there is a little bit of that in terms of a comfort level, but it's really pretty engaging. I mean, I think like, we've heard people like to go into spatial because it's like, hey, there's no notifications, there's no distractions. You're actually really, really there. It's almost more engaging than real life in a way. And you've got all this stimulus, right? If you can doodle with like 3D stuff, and in our meetings we'll see people like doodling. So, um, I think it's different because like in Zoom, you're kind of like, if you're in a 30-person Zoom, it's like really kind of hard to pay attention. We're not really designed to stare at 30 people split in Brady Bunch tiles. Like, where am I paying attention? It's kind of awkward to talk, because when you talk, it's like, oh crap, now I've got the, like, we did a dinner party. I did a dinner party in Zoom the other day, and it's like, instead of having like a normal dinner party, you'd have like 4 or 5 conversations going on, right? Whereas here, it's like everybody's listening to the same person. So I think it's different. I would say it's different. I would say, it's not the same level. I mean, we use spatial every day to meet, for our stand-ups where we try our nightly build, but then also for big Friday demos that we do at the end of the week. And it's I don't know, we kind of crave going back into it, to be honest, because it's like just so
Mm-hmm.
cool. I mean, of course I'm biased, I'm the founder, but you feel like you're really, like you'll just do, like you saw what happened when we were in the space. We just started watching a movie, or it's just a very casual, playful environment. So it is kind of fun. The modality is different.
Yeah, I love that. Casual and playful are really interesting words to use for that sort of thing, and I think that might be a little bit of what I want to express to our viewers because, as I sort of alluded to earlier, there's immersed, there's big screen, there's companies that have long disappeared, that have gone off the face of the earth 3, 4 years ago, that have tried to do similar ideas to what you're doing. But the thing that I'm starting to notice now is the quality of the hardware and the quality of the software are reaching this breakthrough point where the value of these interactions are sort of crossing a threshold. It seems where it's incredibly useful, incredibly powerful. And the other thing you said right before there was something I also experience in here, where I start looking forward to these
Mm-hmm.
meetings
Mm-hmm.
where we have been in quarantine for a very, very long time. And in many cases, my only time where I feel like I'm actually with other members of my staff, my team, is when I come into the studio with them. And so we look forward to those broadcasts with our audience out there. And it feels like it's, yeah, it feels like it's crossing a threshold One other thing that I want to point out, a feature that I really adored as a journalist, um, where I'm standing. Well, one thing I want to point out is Qualcomm was using Spatial for some of their briefings to talk about some of their latest chip technologies.
Hmm.
And one thing I noticed when I went into Spatial to go to one of these briefings with Qualcomm was I just left my controllers down and just used hand tracking
Yeah, yeah.
to interact with Spatial when I was in there. And I noticed I was looking around the room, and some of the journalists I think came in on probably on a tablet, but I noticed there were controllers being used by some of the other journalists. And our studio here, developed by Heaney out there, also employs hand tracking. And it's a process. If you went out and bought a Quest 2,
Hmm.
you are buying it to play video games, Pistol Whip, Beat Saber, games, super hot games that require you to hold controllers in your hand. It's actually a multi-month process of getting comfortable with leaving those controllers
Yeah.
behind and getting to know what an actual spatial interface is working, how you can interact with your menus, how you can switch apps. You have to get used to um, sort of letting the old paradigms go and getting used to the new stuff. And I was maybe 1 or 2 months ahead of the other journalists in that room, getting used to using hand tracking interfaces because we have this studio. And then I went into Spatial, and I went your latest version of Spatial, and you've got a floating menu right here where I'm able to access a lot of different tools.
Hmm.
And I went
Hmm.
into that floating menu, and there's a note taking app. I went into the taking app, pulled up a note, pressed the voice dictation button, and just started speaking a couple notes of interesting things that were brought up during our session. And then I hit the done button, and I was back speaking to you again. That feature to me as a journalist is one of the things I'm missing here in the studio. It's
Hmm.
one of the things I desperately need every time I'm in a virtual space, whenever I'm interacting with someone. I need the ability to quickly jot down a note. And one of the things you guys noticed is I pulled my phone out of my pocket to
Yeah.
type out of the nose hole uh,
Yeah.
on my phone because that's what
Yep.
I'm so used to doing. And they point out, oh yeah, actually, you can go to use this note dictation feature, and I started using that. That one on its own kind of blew my mind to an extraordinary degree because I need something like that to get my work done in VR. So
It's
it's
kind of
just another
incredible.
piece that's there.
In some ways, our meetings in Spatial, we kind of hyper thread because, like, there'll be maybe like if we're having a meeting, there's a main conversation going on. It's almost this spatialized chat that happens because, yeah, you might have a side conversation happening, and people are literally sometimes passing these notes back and forth, and so you'll have this like you'll have the main conversation going, but you'll have all these kind of side chats, and people will just be literally scribbling stuff down easily, or the voice dictation. Yeah, it's so useful. And by the way, from day one. Because we started off on HoloLens 1, we've had hand tracking and voice dictation because that was in some ways like a very limited interaction space to work from. And now you've got these rich controllers, which we also support, but we also have that deep kind of support for hand tracking. And I saw a question here because I get this all the time. Am I on in tech? I just want to answer that is not me. That is Anand Lal Shimpi, but he's got a great domain name, and I like it. I like his name.
John, thank you for the donation.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate any donations we receive. It really helps support our work here. And please, again, go into the comments. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll syndicate this out to podcast platforms so that people can listen to our discussion. Yeah, it's interesting. So, when you use these devices, do you normally go controller or hand tracking?
I go controller. I mean, just because it's just a lot quicker, like that precision. Because I'm constantly like kind of poking and clicking, and hand tracking is awesome. It's still not. It still can be a bit error prone. And so I'm a controller first kind of guy for sure. I mean, but in this sort of situation where you're just chatting, it's all good. But like it can be more cumbersome to like specify precise. Like I think hands are great for gross interactions and especially gestural stuff where you don't need to be precise. But if you're trying to like click specific buttons and or like pull up 3D models, work your way through an interface, it's not quite there yet. Like even the speed you can go through, it's almost like, you can probably type, well, I can type faster than I can scribble. And I feel like it's one of those, like, hey, yeah, keyboard versus pen almost, type things.
Yeah, that makes sense. A couple basics. How many employees do you have, and
Hmm.
what's your funding? What stage of funding are you at?
Yeah, sure. So we are 25 employees based in New York, San Francisco, and then kind of everywhere, the spatial verse. Increasingly remote, actually. It's funny, all our latest hires have been remote from our office. And hey, that's great because we've got the software for it. And also plug, we are hiring for all positions. So let us know. We've raised 25 million to date, which is pretty cool. One of the most funded in the space. And so I think that lets us really I think the thing that's awesome about that is it lets us really put a ton of attention to detail onto the design, but also be really wide because we're the only app that supports HoloLens, Oculus Quest, Apple's AR kit based iPhone with LiDAR, and Google's Google Android AR Core. Which is pretty unique because with that extra funding, we're able to go that wide. And then the other thing is that we can be both 3D, like AR, VR, and 2D. Like I think it's actually really important as we go into this next wave of VR. Some people are going to go out and buy a Quest, but it's not gonna be your next computer. I think Boz predicted on this Bloomberg report that like 10 plus years before it's your next computer. And so in the meantime, we want you to really be able to do some awesome things on your desktop experience as well. So we're actually launching soon a completely interactive web version, which is just so cool. No install necessary, and you get all of spatial right there, and you can be just as productive. And if you just want to jump into spatial, just update your room or drop in some content, you can do that. And so we want to build the best tool. We think cross-platform and is just critical to what we're doing.
Mm. Yeah, cross-platform is really interesting, and I'm noticing people are mentioning immersed. I brought that up earlier.
Hmm.
What would you say uh, sets you apart from immersed, since that's kind of the one that gets talked about a lot?
Hmm.
And what is? I noticed there's also comments about privacy models. Can you
Hmm.
explain sort of how the joining from a link works and how you can sort of set up access for your groups and your
Hmm.
meetings?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so on the immerse question, I mean, Renji's great. He's a homie. They've done a pretty impressive job, and they continue to roll out innovation with like the keyboard and phone tracking. I think the key thing is they're immersed is more about co-working. We're kind of about co-presence in kind of all its forms. So you can actually, like, some artists are, for example, using spatial to, like, you don't need to mirror your computer into spatial at all to be productive, for example. You can just hang out and socialize and pull up stuff, or drink virtual beers, for example. You can change the NFT community, for example, is actually using spatial for virtual galleries and virtual art showings, which is kind of cool. And that's kind of starting to take off. It's really a flexible 3D Google Doc, if you will, right? Where we're kind of more of that productivity collaboration piece, and I think, like, yeah, and we also have that kind of enterprise user base. We're seeing a lot of bottoms up, but, like, traditionally spatial started off as, kind of, as headsets were more expensive, an enterprise company. So companies like Pfizer or Mattel or JP Morgan, are using spatial internally for their meetings, including all the way up to the C level, which is pretty cool. Schools are using it. So we've had classes of 40, 50 people from, Caltech and others in spatial. So I think just the breadth of use cases, we kind of see ourselves, in a sense. I saw in the chat there, VR Zoom is actually a reasonable competitor, but a bit beyond that, because it's almost like if you're in the real world, you can just do a lot more. What was your second question? It was, the privacy model. Yeah. So that's very much like Google Docs. We try to use, there's a lot of new stuff for people to digest in this crazy new AR VR world. And we try to, use the paradigms that people are comfortable with. So a spatial room is just like a Google Doc. You can set the privacy level to just you. You can set it to anyone you've invited. You can set it to anyone with a link. And so you choose your level of privacy, and you can have stuff that nobody else can see. We're actually launching soon private rooms. I believe actually that came out with 3.0, where one of the cool things we've been adding feature set around is as we see bigger and bigger customers kind of get on board, we have companies with over 10,000 minutes in spatial, for example, some with over 50,000 minutes, which is pretty compelling. But those for those folks, like they don't want you to everyone like we started off with the model. In the org, everything's open. Everyone can see everything. But then it's like, okay, as it scales, you actually want kind of more private stuff. So you have a whole kind of gradient of privacy options that you'd
And one
expect
of
from a
the
tool like Google Docs.
I think this is what Ramji is asking, and you showed me this feature in the app yesterday where you uh, there was some very good administrator features in that menu I was able to pull up and able to manage things. And one of the things was proximity chat, or the ability
Hmm.
to let spatial audio fall off if you have distance. So
Yep.
uh, how many people can you support? What's the largest group? And
Hmm.
explain how that works.
Yep. So our official limits are 30 users in headset in meeting, sorry, in headset or in, in room kind of thing. So that could be you could be joining from a phone, for example, for that. And now, if you're on the web, you can have 50 plus more additional users. Now, we have had some people do meetings with 50 people in headset or in room. We don't necessarily recommend that. Your mileage may vary, but we are working on kind of scaling that up because we are seeing the need for bigger and bigger events. And then spatial audio, it's funny because our company's spatial. You would have figured we'd had spatial proximity from day one. But what we've found is every time we turned it on, everyone was like, and if you're having a presentation where one person is kind of talking at a time, which is kind of maybe the default for people, it would just be like, oh, I can't hear you, or like, because it's just like, and as the room gets bigger and bigger, it just gets harder to hear. So we made it an option that you turn on, and because there's times when you want to have a cocktail party style environment, or as you saw in the video you pulled up, you might be in a bar like environment where you want multiple conversations to be happening. So we put it on as an option that you can turn on or off. We didn't think it was the right thing until you get a lot of people in a space by default. We're not sure it's necessarily the right option. I think most people coming to spatial, their initial thing is, okay, let's meet, let's have everyone hear each other. And so that's why that was the thinking behind that design decision.
Hmm. I think if there's any more questions, let them into the chat. I just wanted to get in here and really break down those features, and so I've covered most of the ground I wanted to get into today. Um, the last question I sort of have in my mind is, where do you see your company in the end of this year or early 2022? Where are you heading, and how quickly do you think this sort of mode of work is gonna take off in a serious way?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think we're crazy excited. I think like the opportunities we're seeing, like with the Quest 2 powering just a ton of growth, and then rumored Apple's device around the corner. The amount of interest in the space is kind of crazy, right? You saw, just recently a whole bunch of interesting announcements. The rumor that 10% of Facebook's workforce is working, on AR VR. I mean, the amount of energy the big companies are spending um, in this space is quite compelling, and just adds overall kind of like lift to the whole space, right? I think that's coupled with what's happening with the post-COVID world, where the idea of a central office is really kind of morphing, and we are looking, or we're seeing that the people in the business world are looking for, what does that mean? How does that transform the way we work, and what the office even means, right? I think that those two kind of trends is like a real opportunity to help reimagine kind of what this means. Now, from day one, the other kind of interesting thing here, from day one, I mean, Spatial's been a remote company. Like Elliot, our guy in Missouri, he's our first engineer. Me and Gino were in New York. He was in Missouri, and he would beam in. And as the company grew, he's like, "Oh, I like being in Spatial because I'm not stuck on the wall. I actually have a voice in the room. I'm spatialized. I can like actually wander around." And so I think that trend, or that piece, is going to be even more important as we distribute the office, right? So it's not just the one person talking on the Zoom. The other piece of that is this concept of like what we call the holo office, right? The holographic office, where we've done it now. We can scan our office with our LiDAR scanning, and then all kind of co-work in there to feel like we're back in the office. And I think that's an interesting trend. I think like the spatial, one of the spatial inflection points is there is an activation cost to jumping in VR for a meeting, but there won't be that when you're already working in AR VR to begin with, right? And that's not going to be for everyone today, but that will be. We do think that's coming soon in the kind of time frame you talked about. I think what's going to be really interesting for spatial is like right now. So here's an interesting stat. Our number one platform is Oculus Quest. Quest 2 actually. Quest 2 is actually eaten up all the Quest 1 usage. And I think all those Quest 1 users are buying Quest 2s, which is great. It's an amazing device. Our number two platform is the web, which is crazy. We're an AR VR company. You would figure, everyone would be on a headset. But no, I think that's a really interesting point because the web is so important. And our web version, it's okay today. You can kind of see the meeting and stuff, but we think that's going to be a major inflection point for us. I mean, I don't think I'm projecting that there's a world where the web is our number one platform next year, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, although like the VR AR is growing, and that's where you get the kind of really compelling experience. But like the web is, it's almost like actually I was using the analogy the other day. It's like watching a movie, at home where you're comfortable, whatever, or watching it in the cinema, right? That's kind of what putting on a VR headset is, hey, I'm going to the cinema to watch the movie. I want the big screen experience. I want the high fidelity precision stuff. But like for a lot of people, watching it at home is an okay thing. And I think that's where the web version of spatial is really going to become extremely compelling. And I think, we turn into from this kind of VR, AR focused thing to this broader kind of, 3D Google Doc, or the same way, like I kind of like to say, like, Google Docs brought 1D collaboration to the web in the sense of like linear, documents basically, and then things like Figma brought 2D collaboration to the web, right? And we think we can bring 3D collaboration, and 3D is just a platform in general to the world and to the web, but then also have this dovetail into and bridge into the new world of AR VR, right? And so that's why we are really kind of have a super set of features of Zoom. So that means you can screen share just like you can on a Zoom, or bring your video feed off your PC if you want to, but then also enable all these rich features that are coming with the future as well.
Robert's asking, is there any integration for meetings to be broadcast live with a service like Twitch or YouTube or Facebook?
Great question. We get that quite a bit actually. So coming soon, you will be able to use our web version and screen share it into Zoom or Twitch or YouTube or whatever you want. People are kind of hacking around that to do that now. Today, you can actually use our mobile apps, so iOS or Android apps, and you get a live 3D version of Spatial that you can share, or on an iPad. You can screen share into your Zoom or your YouTube Live or your Twitch if you wanted to. But that's going to get a lot easier when you use the desktop. Like a lot of the videos you're seeing up here, they're actually shot from our PC version. That's kind of internal, our internal version that we use to like kind of have a virtual cameraman hang around and shoot stuff. That kind of functionality is going to come to you via the web very soon. But great question.
Well, I think that's the core of my questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for tuning in today. We'll have more great interviews on uploadvr.com. Tune in. We've got a lot of news breaking throughout the week, and keep coming back to us, and hope to have you on in the future as you add more to this platform. It's changed a lot just in the last year, so can't wait to see what's next. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.